Even in a little bit of a smaller group than normal, imagine what it would have been like for Jesus and the 12 apostles when they had to begin and change the world. I just wonder, do we really believe that if it just started with us in this room right now, that the world would be changed as a result of it? The truth is if that same Jesus gets in our hearts, the way he did in some fishermen's hearts and lives and some tax collectors, it absolutely could happen. So the title of the message today is 938. We need that to be emblazoned in your memory, whatever memory crutch you need. But we're going to be thinking about 938 for the month of January. And I'll tell you why here in just a minute. But to introduce it, everyone's looking for someone. Have you noticed that in this world? Everybody's looking for someone. Employers are looking for the next great salesman that's going to take them over the top. Singles are looking for the mate that they could spend the rest of their lives with. I was thinking about even just the armed services, and I should have looked up, I'm sure these are old from my day back in the past, but the Marines are looking for who?
Few good men.
Maybe they are. I put the few, the crowd. I don't know. Anyway, maybe a few good men too. The Army, I think, was looking for those who want to be all they can be. Again, this may be back in the old days. I'm not sure. The Navy is looking for those who don't just want a job but an adventure. Is that right? Okay. Okay. I can really remember the Air Force. I think they want you to aim high. I think that's what the Air Force wants you to do. Everybody's looking for something. But here's what I thought of as I was reading this passage. I'm just going to look at really one scripture today. God is looking for somebody too. And I think what sometimes we think is that somebody is me. God's looking for me, and he is, and he was, and that's great. And so we want to feel loved, and we want to feel accepted, and we want to get his grace, and all those things are okay. But the truth of the matter is, God's not just looking for you. And God's not just looking for me. He has, to take Marcus's words, a much bigger picture in mind than we tend to have. And so I want us to read just this one passage today, and we're going to read it several times throughout the month of January. I want us to get it on our hearts and in our heads and in our lives. So in Matthew chapter 9, we'll start in 35, builds to the climax of verse 38, because that's what we're remembering, 938. In 935, Matthew, it says, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the harvest fields. And then it's interesting, if you look at the heading for chapter 10, what comes next? Jesus sends out the 12. So it wasn't just like a sermon he preached. There was a plan. And here we go. Let's get this thing started. So I want to move kind of quickly because I do have 4 points, but they're pretty short. And a couple other things to share after that. Here's number one. Point number one is the pity of the harvest. And really the word I should put there is compassion, but we're trying to do the P's today. So we're going with the pity of the harvest. I want us to, when Jesus saw the crowds, he had pity on them. He had compassion for them. So I just looked up the word, let me just say this. Jesus had compassion way beyond just his own family or clique, right? He just looked out over the city of Jerusalem and his eyes got misty. He felt deep agony and pain for the plight of those that were harassed and helpless. He didn't even just look around his church family, which we're incredibly grateful for, and we certainly want to feel compassion and pity for each other. He didn't even just look at his own physical family, but Jesus had this compassion that went way beyond even his inner circle, really to the whole world. And so I looked up the word compassion, and there's several different definitions that kind of blew me away. First of all, to inwardly yearn with tender mercy for somebody else. One that's very similar. The actual Greek word here apparently means moved from your inner organs. Kind of like sometimes you hear the phrase, I love you from the bottom of my heart. That's what compassion is. You're moved from your inner organs for other people. You have a sympathy with a desire to help. That's what compassion means. What do we, when we see other people, what do we tend to see? We tend to see, oh, the world is going to, hell in a handbasket. No one around me loves God. They're all miserable people. And we tend to even say things, like the language at my job, or just watch the news. Husbands are beating wives, and there's child pornography and impeachment hearings. Everybody just hates each other and says mean things about each other. There's shootings all around. And we tend to look at the world and say how bad and horrible the world is. And that's the way the religious leaders in Jesus' day viewed things. But when Jesus viewed people, it's not what he said. It's not how he reacted. He had this compassion. He had a tear in his eye because they were going astray and weren't headed the right direction. It moved his heart. There was a big difference in the compassion or the pity of the religious people of Jesus' day and Jesus' pity himself. How about us? How do we tend to view people? When we see the news or the people around us or the people at our school or at our job, are we filled with compassion? Are we like, oh man, those are bad people. Let me try to get out of here as quick as I can. The pity of the harvest. Number two, the potential of the harvest. When Jesus saw the people and he viewed them as a harvest, what was his reaction to them? Get away? Nope. It was like, we got to get out there and pluck the harvest. We got to go to work. There is all kinds of potential in these people to live for God instead of not living for God. Instead of being hopeless about our family or our workmates or our classmates, we should be hopeful. We should be people who could be saints. They don't have to be sinners. They could be forgiven. They don't have to live embittered lives. They could be saved forever, not lost forever. Amen. And here's the thing I want all of us to think about. Just somebody saw something in you. Amen. Somebody thought you actually had the potential to love and follow God and invested their heart and their time and their life in you. Amen. I was just thinking about the different people who've come up and shared today, and it could be any week, but it was this week. And so you just think about Joaquin and Emmanuel and Admir and Marcus and Jimmy and the singer. If you just think back like 3 or 4 or 5 years to Joaquin and Emmanuel. And I don't know the girls all that well. If I did, I wouldn't confess their sins. But I got no problem confessing the guy's sins. I'm just saying, 3 or 4 years ago, Marcus wasn't, he wasn't up sharing communion speeches anywhere with people. Okay? Give Admir maybe a little bit more than that, but he was not like trumpeting Jesus is Lord and he's awesome. And I'm just saying, I could go down the list, particularly with the fellows, but the girls too, is that somebody saw some potential in you when most of the people around you were just like frustrated, like, oh my goodness, who in the world is this guy or girl? There's a potential in the harvest. And honestly, in one sense, you're special to God, but you're not all that special. Everybody out there can have the exact same kind of change and radical transformation that you did. That's what Jesus said. Amen. So Jesus was moved with pity and compassion, and he saw the potential. Here's I know I've shared kind of this before, but here's what's interesting. So I got a couple of pictures here. What tends to happen is we see people who are rich or powerful or entertainers or athletic or whatever. And what do we think when we see people like that about sharing our faith with them? What's our first thought? Intimidated. They're all set. They're all set. They don't need it. They're good. Why in the world would I try to talk to somebody like that about the gospel? Man, I need to get some